Bill, do you actually know if your sodium hypochlorite is working the way it's supposed to be?
I can see bubbling and effervescing. Isn't that enough?
But do you actually know where it's been, how long it's been sitting there, whether it has an expiration date, whether it's FDA regulated, or are you just assuming it's doing what you think it's doing?
Does that really matter with bleach? Do surfactants actually make a measurable difference? Or is that just a very expensive upgrade to something that already works?
At the end of the day, irrigation is the most critical aspect of this procedure. That's where the game is won or lost. But does the type of sodium hypochlorite actually matter?
These are the conversations that happen between colleagues, the ones that don't make the textbooks, but shape how we practice every single day.
These are the questions every endodontist should be asking. Welcome back to For the Love of Endo.
Let's just jump right into this. Let's just start with the topic of endodontic access. As endodontics is getting more advanced with some irrigation options we've noticed over these last several years, at least since I was a dental student, I graduated in 99, and now 20 some odd years later, 2.5 decades later, the accesses have gotten super, super tiny. And so let's kind of talk a little about traditional access preparation versus conservative access preparation, and when is it appropriate to do which one of those types of accesses. So what are your thoughts on this, Brett?
Yeah, it's interesting because in the conversation let's also recognize that in this journey we're on with For the Love of Endo, we have two different audiences in a way, right? We have the experienced endodontist, we have the younger endodontist that fits into that, but we also have the general dentist. So if we talk about first and foremost the general dentist, using the Triton solution for like 5 years. And the reason is because if you really look at the free chlorine ion in sodium hypochlorite and recognize how fragile it is, and then recognize that EDTA involvement is also going to basically neutralize the sodium hypochlorite. So if we're putting it in and thinking it's dissolving, that's one thing, but is it really? And so that's another reason why for me, I want to be able to make sure with the advanced disinfection, so laser, gentle wave, whatever you're using, that can allow us to have the smallest prep size possible, kind of like the access. There's no one size fits all, but the smaller prep size, and knowing that not only the method of getting the solution down to the apex, which is a challenge on its own, but knowing that when it gets there, it's going to be active, it's going to be doing what I want it to do. What are you using for solutions now?
So I'm basically just using generic bleach.
Like household bleach?
Like household bleach.
Wow.
You buy it at Costco.
This is a whole nother episode.
No, it is. I mean, I always say if Clorox knew what I was using their bleach for, they'd charge me 5 times as much for it. We just buy pallets of it at Costco or Sam's Club. We just use it over the counter.
Okay.
We don't have it. It's not scented. It's not splash proof. It's just straight up bleach. And I use just generic 70% EDTA. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts because I've been teaching this for a while. When you really study sodium hypochlorite itself, it is a very fragile solution. It's sensitive to heat, to light, to air. It's something that has no FDA oversight. It has no expiration date. It has nothing in it to stabilize it. So although it will bleach your brand new scrubs, unfortunately, and it smells like bleach, again, the free chlorine ion, Bill, is the key element to antimicrobial activity. And that's the part that's so super fragile. So utilizing a proprietary branded solution allows you FDA controls, an expiration date, and knowing that there's some stabilizers in there to protect against these environmental things. So for all the things that we're doing the same and all the things we're doing different, it's beautiful that we can teach each other. But to me, what's beautiful about Triton is that the sodium hypochlorite and the surfactant mix, which is proprietary, non-EDTA, when you pull it up out of the bottle, it actually mixes together. Now, it needs to be done right away. And you don't need a tremendous amount because it has so much surfactant. So again, surfactant has been shown to allow for better ingress into dental tubules, into isthmuses. And so the lower surface tension with the surfactant is key. So I'm a huge proponent of proprietary. Now, it so happens that Brasser USA and Vista Apex are the ones that make Triton. And if you haven't tried it yet, I would highly recommend it.
So I have tried it, but the problem is, how do we obtain measurable results once we try it? I've been using this household bleach in my practice and for 26 years. And I look at my recalls, I look at the success rates, and they're comparable to just about all the other high quality endos out there. So the question is if household bleach provides that result, do the proprietary solutions make that much of a difference?
Well, if there is potentially a weak link, let's say it's not every pallet of household bleach, but let's say it's one. And let's say that for a month, you're doing endo with that one group of bleach that's the hypochlorite that's not as effective. Are you okay with that? Because there's no way to know.
There's no way to know. There's no way to know.
And that's where I take comfort in knowing that the solution I'm using has been controlled and has sort of safeguards in it to make sure that whatever impact I want to get from my endodontic irrigation solution, that this is going to give me that.
So every time I put bleach in contact with organic tissue, it effervesces, it bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
I've never put bleach in a canal and never seen that not happen. So by virtue of that digestion of organic tissue, I am thinking the bleach is working the way it should be. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, it's hard to say, but I would say that to me, it's not worth it. Like we've just discussed how you're only opening to a 30, right? Because you're depending, like you are taking the tenet of what we're trying to do with root canal and you're depending on your chemical to do it. And then you're telling me that you're okay with a chemical that really has no control when there are alternative options, which by the way, are not real expensive.
What's the concentration of bleach in these proprietary solutions?
Well, in the Triton on the one side, it starts out as 8% in the bottle, okay? Unmixed. Once mixed with the surfactant, it goes to 4% instantly. But then it's really about the pH balance of it to create a situation where you can simultaneously take the organic debris, right, which is what we depend on hypochlorite for, and the inorganic debris, which traditionally we would use EDTA for. But since EDTA has a neutralizing effect on sodium hypochlorite, they've eliminated that. So in my mind, I'm like, well, number one, I'm not waiting for my inorganic removal until my organic's done. I'm doing them both at the same time. I'm stabilized. I have a ton of surfactant, which means getting into those lateral canals, those apical deltas, those dental tubules. I know that just based on the science of lowering the surface tension of the solution, and the studies support that you have better ingress into those areas. Now, Bill, we know we're not going to have a conclusion here. There's going to be no evidence, but I will say this. Much of endo depends on, in my opinion, from an evidence-based standpoint, the eyeball tests, right? Like there is no level one. The only level one evidence we really have, in my opinion, that we can stand on is that 1 versus 2 visit doesn't matter.
That I agree with.
That's it, right?
I agree with.
Nothing else. No,
I would be really curious to see, really curious to do a poll. How many endodontists are doing what I'm doing and how many endodontists are doing what you do? Because I'll tell you what, I will bet that most are using over-the-counter bleach they get at their drugstores. And I would bet that that's the case. You know why? Because it works.
Well,
and you ask me, am I okay with putting bleach that's non-regulated into my tooth that I don't know the expiration date? Gosh, I think I am.
Okay. Well, there's no right or wrong answer, but I can promise you this. If 98% of endodontists were doing that, I would still be part of the 2% because in my mind,
That's fair.
I don't want to take a chance that I'll be using a solution that doesn't have the impact that it's supposed to have based upon its sensitivity. Now, if you told me that household sodium hypochlorite was not sensitive or fragile, I would say it's a waste, but that's not the truth. And the part that's hard to measure is that free chlorine ion. And so to me, it's totally worth it. It's not like you're talking about a massive expenditure. And to me, I think personally, it looks cleaner, but it's interesting because Dr. Nabil Atassi, who's one of my partners now in Northwest Dental Specialist, he had never used Triton before. And when he used it with the laser, he said to me, I never saw it effervesce like that. So that's the one.
Well, I've certainly touched on a couple of topics yesterday, and I'd like to get your opinion. We're asking everybody when they sit down here, when it comes to, we're going to move to an irrigation component here. Okay. So because we all know that that's probably one of the most important aspects of what we do is the irrigation component. When you're using sodium hypochlorite, what type of sodium hypochlorite are you using? Are you using a proprietary blend or are you buying over the counter from your local drugstore?
You know, that's a great question that I don't even do the ordering anymore, so I don't know. But I am a gentle wave user, so whatever goes in the machine, whatever they require, I think it is just...
It's over the counter.
It's
Gentle wave over the counter.
That's a good point. Gentle wave cannot handle the surfactants and the other ingredients that we were talking about yesterday. We were talking about like Triton has all these surfactants and sodium hypochlorite combined, and most of the proprietaries do, but they do have proprietary, like 6% that you can buy. The point being is we were talking about the fragility of sodium hypochlorite and the free chlorine ion, and just, this household version, just you don't know where it's been, and you don't really know if it's the most effective option.
Have you ever used a third, like a proprietary irrigation solution?
I don't. I actually have always used the
over the counter?
over the counter. Yes.
So it seems to be so far with our guests about 50-50. Half of them are using some proprietary blend. The other half are just going to their local Costco and buying a pallet of it.
Yeah.
So interesting.
We had quite a moment yesterday, Bill and I, just the two of us, because I'm a big believer in the proprietary. It has an expiration date.
What's your favorite?
Triton.
Yeah, I've
really
heard
like
good
Triton.
things.
Yeah.
I've heard good things.
Because it's the organic and the inorganic simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I think that,
I would love to be able to play with different irrigants in the Gentle Wave.
yeah.
That would be fun.
Have you ever, I'm throwing this out there, but have you ever put anything else besides what they told you to in those little reservoirs?
I haven't yet, but it's something
I'm
I
tempted to
want
as well.
I want to bring up to them and ask them if I'm allowed. I'm a little bit of a rule follower, a little bit part rebel also, but I don't want to break my machine.
So what would you want to put in there?
I would love to try Triton. I would love to see if there's any other type of irrigant. I know I have a lot of biological dentist friends, and they're all about ozone and all that good stuff. I would love to try a bunch of different things. I think this is where I would love to do my research. This is where I think we need more research. And because I know the shift that happened in my practice and my cases and my outcomes and my success rate, and just seeing my patients come back for follow-up.
When you say shift, define what you mean by shift.
In the beginning of my career, I noticed that I would have one patient a month that still had pain when they would tap on their tooth. Then I really started the first shift was really embodying patency. And then the second shift was advanced irrigation. And now I might have one tooth a year that I have to redo.
Because of persistent pain to tapping?
Yeah, or maybe there's a lesion that was persistent or didn't go away, or there wasn't a lesion before and now there's a lesion. So I love to follow up my cases. I think that's the only way to really know if what you're doing is working. And I started to see more healing, just better outcomes once I started to take irrigation seriously.
But it's actually not a vial, it's a liquid. And we use simply sterile water. It's a tiny jet of sterile water that is evaporated inside of the root canal. So you have to imagine a tip. It's a plastic tip. You can bring it down the root canal, and at the tip, there's a water jet. And the jet and the tip are designed in a way that the water evaporates. So you have a 3 to 5 millimeter cloud of vapor bubbles that you move up and down in the canal. So now everyone is going to think, oh, vapor, that must be hot. No, it's not. You can create vapor at room temperature and using fluid dynamics, the so-called Bernoulli principle. And then, each of these bubbles, they implode, they send out the shock wave, and this then removes the biofilm. It removes debris. It removes soft tissue mechanically. And it's called cavitation. I think some of the people are listening to the podcast are also used with the term cavitation.
Sure. Joe.
So I'm interested in number one, your background and how you came up with this idea.
So I didn't really come up with this idea. My background, I have a PhD in bioengineering and photonics. So I know a lot about lasers and about tissues. When I did my PhD, it was about creating new materials to replace part of the intervertebral disc, the core of the intervertebral disc. So if someone has low back pain, you do a surgery, you take out material, you want to put something back because otherwise the spine just crumbles. And that was the work for my PhD. So at the time, we created the most durable and most resistant material for this application. Yes. When I finished my PhD, I said, okay, that's beautiful, nice publications, but where is the use for the doctor or for the patient? And then I started to take the technology and really go around from spinal surgeon, neurovascular surgeons, dentists, and asking people, where can you use that? And at one point, we ended up with an endodontist who said, we're using rubber and Portland cement, and I've been doing that for the last 150 years. I said, okay, that might be a good application. And by the way, we're treating 100 million patients every year. So I thought, okay, that's really impactful. And at that point, I decided to dedicate my career to solve this problem. Then on the way, and so we first developed root canal obturation material. So just one material, with a birch canal, no sealer. We can talk about that, later, but I wouldn't make it the focus now. So we developed this material and showed it to clinicians. And then they said, yeah, but how am I going to clean the canal if I have this material? I need to get the bacteria out. I need this with these properties. And then we started to research all the technologies that are out there. Cavitation is something that has been very well known for decades. It is also used in the industry already. You can create cavitation by, moving the surface rapidly like an ultrasonic tip. You can use electric pulses, 50,000 volts between two electrodes to create cavitation. You can use lasers, you can use pulsed lasers, and you can use jets.
So I'm the endocator guy. I thought it was kind of silly. We're not checking in some way, shape, or form to make sure root canals are clean. We all know the studies that show if you obturate with living bacteria in there, it has a lower success rate. If you obturate without bacteria, you have a higher success rate. And so out of all the things we looked at, the thing that kept getting overlooked was ATP, adenosine triphosphate. In 5 seconds, you can see how much ATP is in that canal, which gives you a hint at it's dirty still. We may still want to clean it, or if it's clean. And I'd love it too for like my ATP scores have gone down consistently since I first started because I'm going to chair side feedback. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah,
I have a little list here going here, if that's okay with you, of like little tips and tricks and things like that.
Oh, cool. Well, I want to build it.
I want to understand a little bit more about this endocator. I first heard of it when you posted about this, and I watched your video. I'm like, it's an interesting concept, but how is this different from the culturing that we were doing in the past? Because we stopped doing that because we never got a culture that would allow us to complete these cases. And by the way, I never cultured. That predates me. It probably predates you.
Predates our
so
birth,
when I first saw this, so when I saw this come out there, I'm like, well, that's an interesting concept. You're now measuring something other than a bacterial culture. You're measuring the products of something else. And I said, okay, well, maybe this is going to have some legs, but how is it different?
I think culturing is too little information too late. So culturing is 2 weeks later. If you could have that information in 5 seconds, I would change my protocol. If I were to grow bacteria right then and there and I knew it, I think there's value in going in there and at least doing one last irrigation. So this again is a 5-second test. So and also culturing is positive negative. It's not like a 1 to 100 scale. ATP is much more sensitive than culturing. So even if I get a score of 10 on the ATP test, I'm not going to freak out. I know that's below the level I'm probably likely to grow bacteria. The other thing is for me, I try to do a lot of culturing. It's not helpful. You can't grow half this bacteria anyways. And I'm not getting out the, anti-aerobic compounds to help get it out. I was just doing a quick, dirty, pull out the bacteria, put in an anaerobic test tube. But for me, I never got a clear, like, oh, this is like clean to dirty. It sometimes wouldn't grow and sometimes would grow. But ATP, I go from high to low. And then the bad things about it, like you said, is, so it's great because it's a 5-second test. You can tell if it's clean or dirty or not. But the things about it is ATP is ATP. It's in a lot of things. And I think your score could vary depending on the case, your comfort level. So if I have a vital case, and I use it more on almost all necrotic and especially the lesion cases, but a vital case, if I get a score of 30, I'm not going to lose sleep at night thinking that I did something horrible, and I could probably still obturate it at a 30 or 40 or whatever, but I may just want to go back and then do a little more disinfection. But so that's the downside ATP is like, it's not like just one thing that only bacteria have, like blood, apical fluid, a perforation, a leaking wall. And the other thing is it's in so many different things. Like, why is it high? So I get cases like, and I had one of these last week where I'm like, it's high. Well, I have to get back in there and try to do some more irrigation at the laser. And I've been playing around with the Audi cleans. I use that one. And I got my score from like a 70 down to an 18. I'm like, I don't know what else to do. Let's just obturate it. And then I see my palatal canal. I'm not sure if you had this, where you just completely undersize the file. And like my cone was here and my sealer was here. And at least for me, I'd rather have more walls touching, but did I save that case? Like, I hope I did, because I was able to get in there and re-clean it. I didn't take out my intraorifice barrier and redo everything. So like, I already got it. I already got my canals clean, but I had cases like I get a high score and like, okay, have a missed mid-mesial, I have a C-shaped canal, there's another entrance on it. I got a high score because there's bleeding from the apical fluid. Well, I can't really test it. I want to make sure it's clean. But I feel like culturing is 2 weeks information too late on a plus and minus scale, and that doesn't really help you on bacteria you can't grow anyways. ATP is everything. So it just tells you if it's clean or dirty. And the score in a vital case, I might be more comfortable closing. But if it's like a necrotic case, the big lesion, at the very least, if I get a high score, I'd like to go back in there and just do my irrigation protocol one more time.
So when we look, so I quantify everything with inside the root canal system, bacteria, tissue, and there's what we call the internal bioload, right? The load of biology that we're trying to eliminate. And so is this, so I know that your device will give a score of 1 to 100, and the lower the score, the cleaner the cases. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, and I think that's key, just cleaner. Because I feel like people are like, oh, bacteria positive, negative. I'm like,
pull one out.
Yeah, I think I do. I think
yes, that's what we need. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. With this, because the key thing that I always talk about during presentations is we don't know how much we can leave and still get something to work, or how much we need to remove to get something to work. It's kind of this.
That's a changing scale.
So that might be host dependent.
So this is what I'm saying is, something like this, we
can get that on camera.
Can quantify a specific number that's going to say, okay, above this threshold, you're likely to have non-healing.
But
below this
that number changes though. If you have, we all know, okay, the study is 90% success rate for root canals. Okay, if you look at a CBCT study on a lesion with the big, the necrotic with the big lesion, I mean, our success rates in the studies I've been looking at for complete healing on a large lesion, I've seen as low as 40% and as high as 70% if you're doing a CBCT study. So I feel like on that case, you got to get it. It's helpful to have some information though, you got to clean. And granted, okay, they have a little, maybe they don't have perfect healing. Maybe they have, but I think it's really important in that case to get it super, super clean. But again, in a vital case, you might be able to get to 30, and I'd say that'd be like a fair cutoff. Get it below 30. If you have a necrotic case with no lesion, maybe try to get it below 20. If you don't, get things back in there and start reactivating again. And the other thing is, it's necrotic and a big lesion. I would like to get it really, really clean. And I'm actually still a 2-visit guy in those cases. You don't have to be, but for me, I'm just able to get lower scores doing it that way. So this scale kind of changes on how much clean you need to get it.
So you're talking about touching the canal walls.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there's not a file system out there that touches all the canal walls, right? So and the school of thought before these undulating type files is to spend more time with the irrigation and let the irrigation do the work. We kind of touched on this yesterday about canal size and how large we should be taking these canal preparations to. So how necessary is it if we're spending the proper time irrigating for the canal, for the file to touch these canal walls? And because one of the selling points of this file is it touches more canal walls in that middle third and that coronal third, correct?
True.
So talk to me about this a little bit.
See, again, if we look at the ideal scenario we want, I would like to touch every single part of that canal because we know that the biofilms we treat can get mechanically disrupted by instruments. And that can facilitate a better disinfection. So you can break the biofilm mechanically, and then you can work on it chemically. When it's intact, it becomes more problematic, even with chemical disinfection. There's tons of data on that. So we showed in our data that with your regular O4 taper instrument, for example, in a lower incisor, for example, which has quite a wide buccolingual dimension, you can have around maybe 60% of the canal wall untouched. But when we shift to the XP Shaper at the time, we improved that by 20%. So there is an improvement. You are going in the right direction. But is it going to be 100%? Will that change your outcome? That's a very, it's very hard. So like when you do this will happen. We know that its outcome is way more complicated than that. But the key part here, you can say, I am improving my mechanics. The same way when you activate your irrigation, for example. Standard needle irrigation kills bacteria.
So I don't remember what formula number Triton is, but it's formula 1000 something. That is the stuff that we got to actually work. But really sodium hypochlorite, it's a beast of its own. It's tried and true. It's got that, the hypochlorite and then the free alkalinity that you really need to just make that magic happen, dissolving the organic matter in the root canal
system. So I have a question because Triton has come up a lot, Alex, at this table this week.
In the last couple of days and now again today.
And part of it is because, I adopted it. I was one of the beta testers for it. I've been using it for probably 5-ish years. So for Bill, who has not sort of gotten there yet in terms of his mindset that it's a worthy expense or use versus store-bought, household bleach. As the engineer who developed it and went through all these iterations, what would you say to an endodontist who hasn't quite explored it yet, what he might find is the benefit?
Yeah. So I think, it really just, it makes things simple, obviously, which you guys are used to doing complicated things, right? But just having, I think the most unique thing about Triton is as you're developing that smear layers, you're doing your instrumentation right, because of the chemistry of Triton and its balance to be able to dissolve the organic matter, any of the pulp tissue, bacteria, anything like that. And then the inorganic, all that hydroxyapatite and all this stuff that you're grinding up from the dentin, you're removing all that simultaneously as you're instrumenting. So just right at the jump, you're doing that. It's the continuous chelation kind of theory, right? And thought process behind it. So, you're able to just take care of any of the organic and inorganic material at the same time. So you're going through that with your instrumentation, doing some final rinses with it, and boom, you're right there. You don't have to worry about an assistant, mixing up a syringe or something like that, handing you the wrong chemistry at the wrong time. And we've got a lot of great research that we've done too. At any given point, we've probably got close to 20 research engagements with different endo programs or dental schools. And that was something that was really critical even before Triton was launched, was we had maybe 4 studies that were completed with UPenn, Toronto. We've done other stuff with UBC in the past. You name it, Medical University of South Carolina, all over Buffalo. I could keep coming up with all these different names, right? But it's something that we really embrace, right? Because we can show anything on the benchtop. We can do things in our lab to show efficacy or any of that stuff, right? But when a doc and a clinician is using it in the mouth, it's a totally different ballgame, right? So if we can do some of that other validation through these dental school residency program relationships, you just get that validation before you launch the product. And then certainly you need it, throughout the whole product life cycle too.
It's interesting because as clinicians, we want to devour the literature and understand it to make decisions on what we do at the chair. But from your seat, the level of research knowledge you have to actually develop it. So Triton is sodium hypochlorite. It has a slew of surfactants, proprietary.
Yep.
It has within that the ability to do the chelation. So Alex, in your understanding, what is the advantage of the surfactants? Is it a real effect that a doctor who is not using surfactant would say, maybe this really would help me to improve my irrigation?
Yeah, so it's a few things, right? So the surfactants, they give you a little bit of lubrication too with your file, right? And then it's just going to help the irrigant get into all the nooks and crannies. It decreases the surface tension. You just wet out the canal system a lot better. You can get in any isthmuses, fins, anything like that, right? And then not only that, it just helps carry the debris out, just lifts it out, right? It's like the whole way that you're cleaning dishes and you've got some eggs stuck to the pan or whatever, right? Your Dawn dish soap is going to be able to grab any of that stuff and just get it off with the water, right? Or bacon grease or anything like that, right? You need the surfactants to just help grab, lift, and carry debris out. And that was jumping back to just the research. One of the things when we started looking at it from having an all-in-one irrigant was making it just as equivalent as sodium hypochlorite and EDTA, right? But through that research, we saw that there's actually benefits. You actually have higher antimicrobial efficacy compared to sodium hypochlorite or EDTA when used separately. This was actually a UBC study that was done by Ya Shen, who took over from Hapasalo, but basically showing equivalent efficacy to standard sodium hypochlorite and EDTA irrigation regimen in half the time. So they had a smear layer, they had a biofilm that was all within extracted teeth, of course, but then going through the different irrigation protocols, different time, volume, things like that, and then showing that not only was it was better it was better in the same time, and it was equal in half the time.
I teach to use Clorox, and I've been teaching to use Clorox for decades, a couple of decades.
And
now.
I teach the opposite.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I'll tell you what, I'll bet you the results are probably pretty equal.
I bet they probably are. I will tell you this, though. Like the laser, like a lot of the things we're using, it makes me feel better to have this lie. And it's hard to deny, what I'm saying, right?
Listen, you're speaking the truth.
If it's stable, if it has surfactant, if it's not competing with sodium hypochlorite, even if we don't have a measurable outcome of success versus failure in that scenario, I still will err toward the side of caution versus just assuming that what we've always done before. Because it's funny because you're staunchly supporting what you do, which I appreciate. But think about how many other things you used to do that you don't do anymore.
Very true. Very, very true.
But, it is a great conversation to have. And irrigation solution, to me, there's nothing more important.
That's where the game is won or lost.